One, two, three. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Chalkboard History. It's a fabulous Monday. It's kind of warm. It feels like spring, which means in a week it'll be freezing cold again. We are here today with Joanna Stevens, longtime curator and now the director of Old Stuff.
Yep.
What's the official title? Director of Historic
Site or Structures and Collections.
Yeah, we're big into titles here at the BOFT. We make big, long titles that we sometimes use and sometimes don't. So Joanna is here. She loves this sort of stuff, being on camera, talking about what we do. So I thought that it would be fun to talk about old days at the BOFT, but also let's start with new days. Let's start with new days to come. Let's talk a little bit about the Carter House Visitor Center. So what are your thoughts on the Visitor Center, but what are you working on as far as the museum and the exhibit space? What's consuming all of your time?
Consuming all of my time is fun-filled meetings and Zoom calls and writing and all of that fun stuff. So meetings about the construction of the building, meetings about the museum that's supposed to go inside. So we're working with the state for the building, but we're doing the museum on our own.
And who have we contracted with?
So we are working with Blue Water Studios to do the museum space.
And they're out of Milwaukee?
And they have offices in Milwaukee and Michigan. So, yes, Wisconsin, some folks from up north.
Yankees. Mm-hmm. Exhibit Eric, that's what you call him?
That is what I call him. The guy in charge is Eric. And to differentiate,
two Erics
in my life.
Double
so
Erics.
I just call him Exhibit Eric. Yes.
Except his name is spelled E-R-I-C-H.
That's true, but calling him, Eric with an H is kind of
all right. So let's talk about what not the mechanics or how we're gonna do it and this exhibit and that exhibit, but let's talk about what's the theme of it. We came up with this theme. The project got delayed. So walk us through what people are going to see, but what is the overarching theme?
So what we're going to be talking about is 1776 to 1876. That's really that's really the core of what we're talking about. So how we start the country, what leads to the breakdown, and then we'll talk about the war itself a little bit and how the Carters feature into that, right? Their story tied along too with what's going on.
So why is this important? Because when we first came up with this idea, which has to be 7-8 years ago, we were talking about, soon we'll be at the 250th anniversary of the Declaration, and I know some people are like, why? This doesn't have anything to do with the Civil War. And why is it important to actually take people back to 1776?
Well, but is that really a question about why history is important at all? Because it's all interconnected, I would argue, right? Everything is all interconnected, particularly with major conflicts and political issues, and everything is far more connected than sometimes people today think.
So doesn't going all the way back, especially to the Declaration, doesn't that... I think we know that there will be people who will be uncomfortable, but isn't that sometimes the point, is to really make them think about that interconnectivity?
I think so. I think part of our job is to make people uncomfortable, because you're not really learning or growing if you're not uncomfortable in some way, right? So we want people to ask questions. We want people to learn, because if you're comfortable all the time, what's changing? You're not growing.
Isn't that so true? Because I'm thinking about Lincoln and what he was saying about the Declaration, which was, it means what it says. Right. All men are created equal.
Right.
That doesn't mean that everything is equal in every respect, and we're different sizes and different shapes and different intellectual capacities, but that if we are really created equal, then slavery is wrong. And just saying that today just makes some people go kind of crazy. Like they just can't fit both of those thoughts into the same thought process.
I would agree. But I think the thought about all men are created equal, right? That's how we start the display. We talk about that. What does that mean? What did the people who wrote it mean? Right. Did they mean what they said? Did they mean something different? All of that kind of thing. And so that's how the shifting of that is really what the display is really about.
And isn't that fascinating? Because so primarily the documents written by Jefferson, there are some edits. They never, he in particular, and he lived until 1826, they never thought that they had to explain what was self-evident. And because they didn't, I think Ethan Costello and I had talked about this in a video from long before there was Chalkboard history, about how the whole concept of equality was never really challenged.
Right.
It's only when slavery becomes like this political leviathan that people are like, well, it doesn't really mean that. And so Lincoln has to, he brings about a conversation to say, well, this was never challenged in any way until recently. And the only reason that we're really challenging it is because we're just arguing about slavery. And I think that's would you agree that that's I think one of the most exciting parts of the first half of the museum and exhibit is to introduce this thought process or this time, because if you can understand this, you can really get to understand why there's this huge gulf that develops in the country over 20 years, really?
I would agree, right? And so, when you think about the phrase all men are created equal, it's self-evident fact, right? We want to use that phrase, self-evident. But everybody's got a different opinion of what that means, and it's reinterpretation and kind of the twisting of that to one side or to the other side. But that's still what we're dealing with today, right? I mean, we're still trying to define all men are created equal. What does that mean? Right? We're still literally in the same, we're in a different phase, I think, of that today. But we're still, what does equality mean? Right? What does it mean that we're created? Are men, right? I mean, you want to get, but it's a redefining that continues, I think. And I think it's important to stop and understand what we're looking at during the war and what leads to it. And really they're seeking clarification of what that is. So where does that lead us?
So we end the first part of the... There's two rooms, right? Two big rooms. And the first room ends with his first inaugural, which is now these theoretical social issues are laid to the side, and he, as the now president, because he's just been sworn in, has to lay down the gauntlet and tell Southern states, well, basically, here's the deal. You can get back in the Union and we'll move on as we were before all of the difficulties, or... in your hands, he said, my dissatisfied fellow countrymen, is the momentous issue of civil war. So I think he's pretty clear. You got two choices, and choice B is going to lead us right to war. So lead us then into the second phase of the exhibit. What are people going to see in there?
So when you go into the second room, right, that second phase, you're getting...
Are the rooms blue and gray?
I literally actually
Black
told
and
them
white?
on the Zoom call last time, I said, listen, let's talk about our color scheme. I told the prior people, no blue and gray, we're not doing it. So no blue and gray.
No blue, no gray.
No.
All right.
So when we go, it's going to be a secession timeline. We're going to talk about kind of what leads there, the states that are going, and then we're going to talk about troops from Tennessee, which is very important to me, U.S. and Confederate troops, both from the same state, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about the breakdown there by county, and then we're going to talk about USCT, the percentage ultimately that come from USCT from Tennessee. And we're going to talk about the three Carter sons that join and their place in that, and then we'll do a brief... I have one wall dedicated to cover the whole rest of the Civil War.
So are there...
And then we'll get to Franklin.
Are there U.S. troops from every county?
Yes.
So there are U.S. soldiers.
So it's real close, like not a whole company from different ones, but we have some representation.
How many from Murray County?
Oh, crap, I don't know.
How many from Williamson?
That's why I have the data.
I think this is important because the South, as we've said many times, is not monolithic. Neither is the North. But that there was, especially in Tennessee, much Union sentiment. In fact, this state provided more white soldiers to the U.S. Army than any of the Confederate states. And as far as USCTs, is it first or?
I'd have to check the percentage numbers. I've got everything. It's pretty close.
I mean, it's
pretty close.
I mean, there's thousands and thousands of men, black and white. So I think probably it's one of the most least understood components of Tennessee history.
So we were talking at our meeting last week about the display, and I'm including a really wonderful image that I worked hard to get a scan of, and it is two brothers. It's literally one of the, you always hear the phrase brother against brother, all that kind of thing. But it is a U.S. soldier and a Confederate soldier, actual brothers.
Yeah, I know this one.
And they're from Dixon County, and they're in uniform. So it's taken after they muster out in 65.
Merry Christmas.
It's just, it's a phenomenal image, and the gentleman who owns it has allowed us to scan it and include it. It's wonderful. But we also found, Brian actually turned me on to a drawing that is at the East Tennessee History Society, and it was drawn in 63, but it shows Knoxville in 61. It's called Simultaneous Recruitment of U.S. and Confederate Troops. It's literally Gay Street in Knoxville, U.S. flag and Confederate flag on the same street, and they're recruiting for both armies at the same time.
Wow. Well, and this room, I think people are really going to, maybe surprised isn't the right word, but I think they're going to learn as much in there as they certainly do about the political machinations that lead us to war. Because although we have a significant bit on the Battle of Franklin, we interpret that every day. So I don't think we need to go through the Franklin part. But what happens, so post-Franklin, what do people see as they head toward the exit, whether they're going out at that point on a tour or they're looking around after their tour? What are they going to see after November 30th, 1864?
So the hope was after the battle portion, right? We've got to talk about the battle. We have to talk about how it affected the family. We'll have a little bit there as well. And then we'll talk about Nashville to the end of the war. So we do have to cover that. And we're going to talk about how the Carters start to deal with their memory of what happened here in the context of Reconstruction. And so I'm working with the exhibit company to get a Reconstruction timeline where we're going to be covering national, regional, and also some familial points in that as well that gets us up to. And we're going to be talking about really the square in Franklin as well. So we'll be talking about kind of the transformation, and that is a point for various things happening.
Well, I was just thinking about like the Carter family, since we had the staff meeting earlier and we were talking about Reconstruction and black men getting the right to vote in Tennessee in 1867, and then by 1875 there's a Civil Rights Act. It reminds me of Moscow having, I think he kept a copy of a newspaper, but there's that moment when he wrote about he did not support the effort, but he also did not think that the rights given should be taken away. And, this is coming from a man who had once owned slaves, who had served in the Confederate Army. And, there were a lot of people like him, but there were also a lot of people that were not even remotely close to the same opinion. And I think that is a wonderful part of this, is that we can allow people to see some of the complexity. So we go all the way, though, to when the site was purchased by the state, meaning the Carter House.
Well, that's the question.
Right. We haven't decided yet.
So, I mean, I was actually thinking about other areas in which we can do parts of the display, right? So like in that hall as you're exiting out the top, and using that wall there, or potentially in the other multimedia room to talk about its preservation as a state historic site. So 51 purchased, opened in 53, and we've got different objects that we can use, because I've been saving all those signs, as you know, all the old Carter House signs to do and use. So.
This project has taken so long. We've actually seen other history unfold just since this was in its infancy, but even when the master plan was created in 2015, a lot has happened. I mean, there's a new statue in the square. The whole Confederate iconography discussion has actually come up and come down just since then. So we've actually seen almost a decade of history play out as we've been planning this. So this building will serve the site and the staff for 40 to 50 years. So,
I hope so.
I'll be dead by the time they build another one. That's the goal here, is to leave behind something for the future. But so I wanted to start with this because then if you dial back some of the very things we've talked about, so some of this is old-timey BOFT days, is it any wonder when we talk about Lincoln, slavery, that Tennessee wasn't, just exclusively a Confederate state, is it any wonder that we've taken all the hell that we have taken through all of the years? Like, think back. What are some of the craziest things that you remember? Because clearly, you were talking about 2009.
Well, he was asking me about it. He couldn't remember what date certain things had happened.
November 1st, 2009, when we started actively managing the Carter House. Like, what are some of the, when you look back on it, as aggravating as it was then, can we at least laugh about it today? I
think we have to.
Well, I guess so, yeah.
Well, a story I was talking about this morning is because when we first started our mutual cooperation.
Ugh. Remember that term, mutual cooperation? I was like, you can't mutually cooperate with people who don't want to mutually do anything.
It was bad. It was really bad. So, but during that time, before the official merger, so we were mutually cooperating, but we were not actually merged. There was no point of sale system at Carter House.
Oh, I remember.
And I used to run the gift shop at Carnton, and I had put the point of sale system in there.
There wasn't one at Carnton when we started.
Right, so I put that one in there because I'm a glutton for punishment, and we entered every single thing in there. And anyway, so we put it at Carter House, and I went up. Wait a second. So I went up to try and get in that day to start doing the stuff.
And
they would not open the door.
Was that Dennis Anderson sitting in the back?
But I wasn't going to say his name. But no, he would not open the door for me. And so I had to sit out.
He's sitting. He's like this.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
I think I hear knocking at the door. I'm not sure. Yes, those were good times. I remember walking up and Alan was standing at the door like this, saying it's not going to work. And I was like, well, it's going to work one way or the other. That was quite a day.
It was a rough time.
I look back on it and I think I just thought of Angel. She was crying one day and saying, it's not like Carnton. Carter House isn't like Carnton. And I was like, you're right, it's not.
Oh my gosh.
And here's all the reasons why it's not. And these are all things that have to be fixed or changed. I guess, I think the one thing that I've never forgotten was I encountered so many people who claimed they loved it so much. And then they either weren't taking care of it, or when they didn't get their way, they left and they never came back. They never again set foot on that hallowed ground at that special place. I could get fired tomorrow and you wouldn't be able to keep me away at certain times because it just transcends it. And I look sometimes back at those people, those times, and I think it is no wonder David mangled my quote. I said I was taking flack because I was on target.
Yeah.
And that was what I think still is true all these years later, is that I don't love it like some of these people claimed it, because somewhere along the line it was like they acted like they owned it. And I've never felt that way, that I believe it belongs to everybody.
I mean, you and I have talked about this before. I feel a certain sense of ownership and connection, right? Because I'm the one responsible for certain things, right? The certain objects or that kind of thing. You feel a connection. You feel a closeness, right? You do have a sense of responsibility. But we've talked about how many people have we seen come and go who are like, I'm retiring from the Battle of Franklin Trust.
Yes.
I'm never leaving the Battle of Franklin Trust. I am going to die working at the Battle of Franklin Trust.
I'm going to die on the battlefield.
As soon as those words are uttered, I know they're leaving.
Yep.
I already know they're quitting.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And so we have been here together for how long?
George Bush was president. That's how long it's been. A long time.
So
20 years.
Almost 20 years we've worked together. Because he only started a few months before me. I will say that. But, yeah. I didn't have any gray hair when I started working here.
No.
And no children either.
No, look at that.
Yeah.
It is remarkable to think that we started at Carnton, saw the trust created, worked through the sesquicentennial, the Fuller story, and then Ripavilla. And Ripavilla came about in the middle of COVID. Like, it was the most messed up time. And once again, the rock hurlers showed up. I remember being at the city meeting where I won't even say her name. I won't even give her the decency of saying her name. She showed up to insult us and lie about us. And I remember thinking, you don't even realize you are the perfect kind of fuel for my engine. Like, you just make me want to do this. And the people like Jacobson's he's always lurked around and coveted Ripavilla. And I was like, well, actually, you're kind of like half right, because I did believe that the way to manage and interpret and embrace and care for Ripavilla could only be done by an organization and the people who work for it, who are on the board, who are committed to it because they care about it, not because they own it or they think nobody loves it as much as they do. Someone years past said, it's like we're like the buffalo. We're a dying breed. And that was like, I was like, no, it's not quite like that. But when you set yourself up like he did to be the martyr, well, then you are the martyr.
Right.
And
but that's, again, we've seen that.
And then he walked out. He walked out that day
times.
And never came back.
Right.
Never came back.
I think there has to be, like we've talked about, there has to be a certain level of professionalism, right? Yes, you do have to be invested, but it is a job.
Oh, yes, it is. Yes,
and it is. When people carry on, as we say all the time, the greatest job ever, you have to deal with a lot of crap. And we have dealt with a lot of crap. We have certainly dealt with a lot of crap in the time that we have worked here, from people or things or the houses or structures or, have you.
It is a job. And jobs come in, all sorts of different shades. And even if you're doing something sometimes that you really do love,
there has to be that seed. Otherwise, you really wouldn't make it. I don't think here in particular. This is not like a lot of other workplaces.
You're right, because if your team is 0-14 or you're 30 games out of first place and it's September 27th, you love the game, but you're like, can we just go home?
I know it. How long have we been talking? You can talk about baseball.
I didn't say baseball. I said 0-14, so that'd be like a football team. But it is true. Some people, when they say greatest job in the world, it's not. You're not volunteering. It's not a round table. It's not a Civil War guys battlefield tour. Mm-hmm. It's everything that comes with it.
Right.
It's staff issues, overrun toilets, light bulbs are out. This staff person quit. This staff person's arguing with this staff person. It's a shady email. It's a Facebook post. It's working for 10 years with the state to get a visitor center. It's everything that goes with it. And then, as I just told a staff member last week, if you think you have it so tough, we're talking about people who fought at the Battle of Franklin or someone who was enslaved for 30 years. I think you'll get through the day.
Yeah.
And I have to remind myself sometimes when I'm driving home and I'm like, ugh, what a crummy day. And then I drive in the morning and I'm the happiest guy. Because the next day, there's something new that might come up and some different opportunity. You know how great it's going to be to break ground at that visitor center, though? You know what I'm going to do? It's like that scene out of, I think it's Band of Brothers, where Tom Sizemore's character takes his little jar and it's got one from Sicily and one from, and he scoops out some of the dirt at Normandy. I'm putting some in a jar that day and I'm taking it home, because there is a little bit of you that you leave there.
Yes.
And that visitor center is going to be... That's going to be the ultimate, in some ways, probably the ultimate accomplishment at that site.
Yeah.
Which...
I don't know. I mean, I guess yes, but at the same time, for me, the farm office was the clearing of the land south of there and the farm office.
Yes.
is a huge, huge thing. I mean, that was 17.
I guess I'm thinking about the day when the protesters showed up and stood outside that visitor center that stands today, and they tried to bull rush the door to break up the board meeting, and we had to have the police there.
Yeah, I know.
And they wanted us to fail because they wanted to have Carter House be their little club.
Yeah.
And I thought that it wasn't your club, that the Carter House was something that belonged to everybody from all over the nation.
It's amazing how those people who were there that day, where are they now? I mean, we know where some of them are, but right.
There's a few in the ground.
No, I know.
But some of them, they never visit.
Right, exactly. For people who were so committed and so dedicated, just like it's all we can do. We got to pour all of ourselves into it. We're the only ones who can tell the story.
Yep.
Right. So
do you remember the day? Last thing that day? Do you remember when she was poking me in the chest?
Yeah.
She's like, "You're from Wisconsin," and I was like, "I'm from Minnesota. There's a difference," which is always makes me chuckle.
Which is amusing because I'm from Wisconsin.
Because you're from Wisconsin. Yes. She didn't know apparently that there's a difference between the states, or But those kinds of people, they never work there. Right. In a way, I don't think they ever got to see the magic. That's the fun of it, is through all the crap, you get to see the magic every day, and that makes it worth it.
It does.
That does.
It does.
All right, anything else? We're 28 minutes in. I've got to film one with Van Dyke here in a minute. That ought to be some good times from the old days.
He's got some thoughts for sure about early
All right,
Carter House
last
stuff.
thing. When's the visitor center going to open? Prediction? You have to pick a date. I'm going to pick a date. We're going to see who's closest.
Now, are we talking like open for business, or are we talking about the museum?
Open for business.
First day of operations.
First day. First day we sell a ticket.
June 15th.
May 12th, 2026. We'll see who's close. June 15th or May 12th, we'll see who's closest. May 12th, June 15th?
June 15th.
All right.